Okay, so we get the wall, and we get the Deadlock ult, and we get the kill off the player trying to break the Deadlock ult. I mean...
到的，因为很少有队伍会在你这边拿出这样的英雄。
哎，钢索
，Aaron 的钢索。
So this right here is why you clicked on the video, because Deadlock was finally played in a pro match, and it was played in an elimination match in the Chinese Ascension tournament. So in the pistol round, we can see that Deadlock's team is starting on the attack, and we have a solo Deadlock outside of the A main area. It looks like the NIP attackers are setting up for sort of like a default start to the round with maybe an option to go into a cat split. And if you're going to do some sort of cat split, it would make sense to put the agent that has sort of the least attacking enabling utility, being the Deadlock, in the core that's trying to actually burst onto the site, because the idea here is that they're going to hit aggressively through tree, and then one player will kind of lurk and inch as they do that. And that makes sense to be the Deadlock here because she doesn't really provide any sort of attacking utility. So we can see that as they speed up through the tree, it's actually going to be the Deadlock that comes through the smoke using the distraction of her teammates to come through and get 2 kills. And now this wall is pretty interesting because it actually is pretty impactful. One of the ways that teams will sort of play this post plant is you'll have somebody sitting on this little box over here, the jump up box. And then oftentimes with a KO, you will wait for some noise to be made. You'll call for the flash will happen here, and then the person on the jump up box will come up and take this fight. Now, obviously, this team does not have a KO for the flash. They really only have the Omen, and there's no paranoia available. But the idea is still there that you can kind of use this wall and the breaking of the wall as the trigger to take a fight into heaven. So NIP pretty easily wins the second round with their gun advantage, and in round number 3, we get to see an aggressive play being made, it looks like, in A main, where they're going to try and just push through this one way and fight in, and immediately 2 players die. So it looks like the idea to me is that they threw a Sova dart. Let me back this up real quick. They're throwing a Sova dart that's going to land up here, and it's going to scan anybody who is trying to fall back into a site. And the idea being that they hope that with the aggressive push of the 2 players through the one way, that whoever is defending at the A main choke point is going to hear that noise and then run away, and they're going to run into the scan, and then you can maybe chase them down or potentially throw the gravnet grenade and catch them and then run them down as they are slowed and trying to escape. Now, the main problem here is that they are running dry through a one-way, so if anybody tries to actually fight them in A main, as the defenders do here, they are just peeking at a disadvantage into players with rifles. So I think actually this play is kind of okay in theory if they had just cooked a little bit more and brought this Omen over here to throw a paranoia, because at that point, the paranoia is 100% going to force anybody who's playing here to run away because you're going to be blind. And that will make you run blind into the scan. And also you will not be able to see the gravnet coming potentially. So you'll be blinded, you'll be slowed and crouched, and you'll be trying to escape and running into a scan. And that will allow the attackers to actually run you down and accelerate into a hit. So the first gun round for NIP looks like they're going back to sort of their pistol idea, with the Deadlock holding space, being the agent that has the least attacking utility. Just use them sort of as like a turret to hold space in case you want to go into this cat split with the delayed person coming through A main. Looks like NIP is putting a little bit more emphasis on mid pressure here. They're really trying to push forward, almost kind of playing the Cypher as a duelist, an entry duelist. A little interesting, as they're the first player to take contact, but we'll see how this works. And it looks like they are going to pull the Deadlock out. So again, you know, this agent contributes essentially nothing on attack. And so if she's sort of like the last one in, I guess it doesn't really matter. You're just using her as a rifle. Could be anything. But we'll see how this works. Looks like they're going to try and explode here into market. We get the Omen Paranoia coming through. A couple of kills go off. Deadlock helps to get the trade, and then gets shut down trying to come through market. There are 2 players coming through from B main who are going to be able to get this last player and start taking the site. And we should notice, it is worth noting that there is the Deadlock wall here blocking off CT. Now, players could still shoot through this, so if somebody was here fast enough, it doesn't really help that much to take the market area, because you could just be shot in the back. but we'll see if this wall ends up actually mattering. It is helping the Sova, who is in market now, be protected, and actually looks like it's going to give him a noise cue of somebody breaking the wall. So maybe the Deadlock wall does actually help them win the round here. Okay, so now NIP has a big gun advantage going into the next round. Looks like KBG, the defense, is going to try and play aggressively with their jet knives to try and get some value here. And again, we're sort of in this default where Deadlock just holds space outside of A in case the attackers want to go back in this direction. As KBG pushes out, we're going to see essentially no movement on the other side of the map. And this could be sort of an indication of one of the weaknesses of this Deadlock is, generally speaking, if you see a bunch of aggression out one side, you should be able to start taking the other side of the map. But because Deadlock provides essentially nothing in the way of aggressive utility, it's hard to just walk through a one-way, even if you have a gun advantage. So we're going to see Deadlock basically just sitting outside of A, hoping that somebody else gets aggressive and makes a mistake. NIP waiting and waiting and waiting, hoping that they've delayed enough time, and then start to make their way towards A as they are running out of time to actually close out the round. So now we start to see some problems because the paranoia hits. It's going to counter the drone to some extent. Looks like Deadlock has actually thrown the wall here to block off anybody at door. However, one player is already close enough to where they're through the wall, and they just come through the door anyway. So it's two pieces of utility, the Omen Smoke and the wall blocking off door. Kind of like reinforcing the door, I guess, but we'll see if this actually has any real impact. Looks like there are a couple of kills that come through from the Deadlock player. Again, I wouldn't say that any of them are utility-based. It's basically just like running in as a rifle. And they are able to get the spike down in a 1v1 with Deadlock ultimate. So let's see if this is sort of the equalizer. Does this secure the round? I mean, this is not a great anti-eco round, I'm going to say. In a 1v1, you've lost 4 rifles. But maybe the Deadlock ultimate can help us sort of secure this round. And the dink and the ult whiff and the value is just not there. And actually loses the 1v1 to the Sheriff at medium range. You lose the round after investing the Deadlock ultimate. That's a little unfortunate. So it looks like NIP is going to try and speed up the tempo here in this round. And they're going to throw a Sova Dart and a Grav Net into A main to try and catch anybody up close. Unfortunately, it looks like 3 or 4 of them got KO knife suppressed and scanned. They're going to fall back out and once again go into kind of like this Deadlock default. Maybe trying to be a little bit more aggressive now because they've already kind of revealed their positioning. So they need to speed up a bit to retake some map control. So they go ahead and drone middle. They go ahead and show some presence there. And they find out where the operator is, which is going to lead them to go into their cat split. Deadlock has a little bit of a forward position up on top of the A main sort of one-way spot. And we'll see whether this ends up having any impact. Again, I will say they have not really been using the Deadlock utility. It looks like they actually do throw the Deadlock wall here, which is kind of interesting, over here to block off anybody in garden. So to kind of like secure their push through tree, I guess, making sure that nobody can just push through this smoke and fight them. You know, whether that is like good use of the utility or not is kind of hard to say. But again, it's going to be the Deadlock coming late through A main as the core of the team does all the work coming in through A, or through tree rather. And it looks like the Deadlock is kind of just like holding down A main at this point. Also kind of interesting to note that they're protecting the Deadlock's position with the Cypher Trip, not with the Deadlock utility. We haven't really seen any use out of these sound sensors so far. So I just kind of wanted to point that out as like, you know, Deadlock is here, but is Deadlock really doing anything? They're actually going to give the plant to Deadlock, so we're working our way towards another ultimate. But again, no real impact from the Deadlock. So now that NIP is brimming with confidence, it looks like they're going to go for an aggressive B play now with everybody stacked outside. They go ahead and paranoia to take the aggressive space against the operator. Fortunately, great shot from the Jet, and then a second one followed up on to the Deadlock. So again, no real value from the Deadlock, and we can see that there are some serious issues with taking space aggressively with this particular comp. So in the next round, we're going to see kind of the same play, their Deadlock default, I guess. We'll call it the cat split with the Deadlock late A main. They're on an eco round here, so I'd be surprised if they were able to find some value, but the Jet is still dangerous. the Deadlock does have full A main control, and they have been able to get onto the site. Now, they don't have the spike down. The grab well, or the grab net, I should say. Again, kind of contributing to a kill there, more so just the KO not really repositioning. And we do see this wall again, which is quite good against the operator, I will say. It's going to be nearly impossible for the Jet to get through, so they're going to have to reposition or, you know, knife it down, I suppose. And with the added utility of a stun there, another Jet smoke, they know one player is in A main, and they know one player is heaven. So off the camera contact, they go for the Deadlock ultimate, and it gets thrown towards heaven. It does actually catch somebody, and it will get a kill to close out the round. So the Deadlock ultimate finishes the round. They again go for this market split, which we saw in a previous round. And just right here, I just want to pause because this kind of gives me the general idea of how they're thinking about this agent in an attacking context, which is to essentially take part of the map and then secure that part of a map with a smoke plus a wall, which we can see here towards CT. So the Deadlock wall plus the Omen smoke is pretty strong. You know, I guess it would kind of be nice if the Deadlock wall was maybe just opaque and could cover the area by itself, but that being aside, this is how they're using it, is with the smoke in most cases to sort of create this like impenetrable smoke that you can still shoot through, but you can't move through and you can't see through, to protect their flank as they go for an aggressive play into a site. So this is kind of just like a basic market split with maybe just a little bit less attack power because you're kind of just sending in the Jet alone. The Cypher kind of just has to run in. There's no flashes really behind this other than just the Omen paranoia. It does end up working, and you can see that it probably is going to win them this round. All right, so it looks like NIP is trying another aggressive play towards B main, and they actually go with a slightly different version than they ran before. They do throw the paranoia as they speed up here. They throw the same Sova dart to scan anybody who would be playing towards A site. And then they're actually going to throw the grav net to land outside of switch. So the same idea that they had before, except the grav net positioning is for somebody who might be falling back farther, and they throw the paranoia to help them actually accelerate into A main. Now, as they get onto the site, we still see that the Deadlock has most of their utility. They have been throwing the wall up towards heaven, but in this case, they opt to just put a sensor towards door, which makes sense. It's a place that you generally come out of pretty noisy, so it would trigger in a lot of cases. Again, still holding the wall. Looks like they're just sort of going to take a timing, actually wins the fight, secures the area of the map, gets a second kill, and then places the wall and another sensor to kind of really shut down this choke point. So, I mean, again, it's not really like the Deadlock utility has done a lot, but the wall does do something, and we'll see. Okay, the stun, kind of helps maybe fight for this area. The wall slows down the retake a bit. To me, it still kind of seems a little bit more like a win more character. Like, if you're ahead in the round, Deadlock is pretty good at securing the round. I mean, we see the sensor get a double stun there, and then the Deadlock gets 4 kills, but they were in a 3v2, so it's kind of a situation that they should be winning anyway. So being one off of the ult, they go ahead and grab the orb for Deadlock, and we're going to see a 4v4, looks like executing onto the A site. They go ahead and dart middle to try and draw some players off. They use the Deadlock ultimate. It actually whiffs through the door. They try to secure the door, goes down, the timing is not there, and the last round of the attack half is going to end in a whimper for NIP. So for me, the defensive half is definitely where Deadlock is a lot more interesting to me, just because the way that I look at this character is not only do you have this wall, which is very, very good at shutting things down. I mean, the grav net is also quite good at shutting down aggressive plays. And then the sensors in particular can be extremely, extremely strong at shutting down aggressive plays, because it's kind of like being able to put a breach on both sites or multiple breaches on one site, where you can reactively essentially use a fault line to fight off of or shut down players that are trying to aggressively explode onto your site. So on the pistol round, it looks like they just have split up their sentinels. They've got Cypher utility in middle. They go ahead and throw the Deadlock wall in B and then start to rotate off, which makes a lot of sense. You know, you kind of just lock down this part of the map, at least for quite a bit of time, and allows you to focus somewhere else on the map. And as the attackers try to explode through tree, we're going to sort of see a pistol brawl. You know, nothing really unique to talk about here, just a lot of chaos, a lot of missed shots, a lot of kind of running around and just brawling it out, which ends up in a 2v2. And then the Deadlock swings and gets a kill. And now it should be a pretty easy cleanup as the last player for the attack is quite low. Moving on to anti-eco, again, we see just Deadlock wall in B main, kind of shutting down anybody trying to lurk through there, and refocusing attention towards market and over towards tree. So this time we actually do have the Deadlock having bought some of the trips, the sound sensors, one placed for stairs, one placed for lane. This sort of like a last minute fallback option to fortify the B site, and we get to see once again the wall thrown out reactively to block off B main. You know, again, this is fairly breakable and just kind of delays the inevitable if the attackers want to push through there. But it looks like it might be enough to dissuade anybody from pushing through. I think one thing that is worth noting about the Deadlock wall is because it takes so long to break, or it can take quite a long time to break, it does buy a bit more time for the defenders to rotate over. However, at this point, it looks like we're just going to the opposite side, away from the Deadlock utility and into the stacked site for the defenders, which is not a good sign for the attackers. And we're going to see, okay, the trades coming in are going to be rough, and everybody dies almost instantly. So against the eco, the Deadlock setup a little bit different this time. We've got both of the sensors to kind of counter the aggressive push if they were to speed up through B main. They go ahead and throw the wall once again, and then rotate over to play off the Cypher trip in middle. So kind of standard stuff so far with this wall, and just the anti-aggressive push. You know, the sensors make sense where they're put, which is, you know, generally people will speed up towards lane, or they'll dash in and try and hit the switch on boat. So these are kind of like anti-jet, anti-sort of explosion out of B main sensors that are placed. And like we get a little bit of a spam there. Again, no real value from the Deadlock utility so far other than just slowing down the B main stuff. Looks like the sensor was tripped and a kill was gotten off of it, so that's kind of cool. But this round was in NIP's pocket anyway with the better weapons. All right, so this round, again, another kind of interesting setup from the Deadlock. We've got the wall actually placed to block off lane with a sensor and logs, it looks like, and a sensor for lane as well. Again, all this seems to sort of basically just allow them to go middle and play off the Cypher trip primarily instead of holding towards B site. And then they get to triple stack A and just really kind of force the attackers to always go towards this A site. At least seemingly that's what the attackers have been doing. I don't necessarily know if this is what you have to do. It seems like maybe you could just force the issue with the B main, since there's no like Killjoy utility there to do damage as you come into the site. But so far it's been working. This trip actually seems pretty strong, I will say. I know this is a video about Deadlock, but this trip seems like kind of a broken Cypher piece of tech, maybe. I want to go ahead and point that out just because that seems very annoying to deal with and very hard to break. So we'll see if the attackers can force this into the triple stack. Okay, running dry through a choke point when you have a KO flash seems like maybe not the best idea. Okay, so 12-5, and boy, we have sort of a predictive setup, it looks like, from the defenders. A has not been working for the attackers, and so the defenders have stacked a lot of utility towards B. They have a Cypher trip here, which seems fairly hard to deal with. There's 2 Deadlock sound sensors, and then there's of course the Deadlock herself with the ultimate and the wall. So we'll see if this ends up getting a lot of value or not. Actually, both trips are here, it looks like, from the Cypher, and the Cypher and Jet are just kind of playing towards A. Okay, so we get the wall, and we get the Deadlock ult, and we get the kill off the player trying to break the Deadlock ult. I mean, I kind of need to go back and watch this again because it happened so quickly. I'm a little bit confused as to why there's only 2 players pushing up aggressively like this. Maybe it's just because of the precedent that the Deadlock has set. It's like, oh, I'm just here by myself. I just throw this wall in response. So they try to get aggressive and they get caught as a result. I think the player falling out of the Deadlock ult actually triggered the sound sensor. That seems like a weird interaction. Honestly, this map is over at this point. I don't think that a lot of the stuff that we saw from Deadlock was particularly good. I don't think that's a problem necessarily with NIP, because I just don't think that the options that the agent gives you are particularly good. I think the stuff that we saw from them as far as like how to use the utility that you do have with Deadlock was actually pretty good. And I think maybe more interestingly is the idea that's presented by having this very different comp, these two Sentinels, where they're basically just really playing a different style of Valorant than the other team is, which is causing issues for the attackers. I think a much better team would probably figure out ways to abuse this much more quickly, but I do think that it is just kind of interesting to see that even just throwing some weird stuff out there that has at least some logic behind it is enough to throw off a lot of teams that are kind of near the same level. And because of that, I do hope that we see teams innovating more with stuff. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be the Deadlock, but I do think it shows, you know, maybe a little bit of a weakness of just always playing meta all the time, especially if you are playing teams that are kind of around your same rank or maybe even a little bit better than you. If you just run the meta comp against them, they're going to know how to play against that. So you're almost better off playing something different to try and throw off the game plan of a team that should be beating you if you're just playing with like the same comp.